Welcome, everybody, to our 4th of July edition of the Safely Stream podcast. I am Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and joining me, as always, my co-host from Nexus Games, Sharky. How are you doing this 4th of July?
I'm doing all right. And I won't be from Nexus Games for very much longer since we're renaming the company. And happy 4th to everybody. It was ironic that I got that right when it appeared on video, even though I typed it like 30 seconds ago.
Right now, it is G-raining outside, so we'll see if it keeps lasting in terms of whether or not we have any 4th of July celebrations around here.
I mean G plus raining.
Mm-hmm. SD G-raining.
G generation raining.
Yeah. But as I said, we are streaming this on July 4th, so we're not expecting a lot of chat. And our topic this week will be kind of on the smaller side. And as always, if you are interested in pitching a topic or want to hang out with us, you can leave comments or join our respective Discord.
Yep, we're always welcoming to people in our Discord, and there's lots of cool things to do on our Discords.
Mm-hmm.
One, and we have 2 separate Discords that also needs to be, recognized, as well as 2 separate chats. So feel free to chat in both of them. Feel free to join both of our Discords. And I think we should get into it.
Mm-hmm. So our topic this week is we're going to be discussing kind of bad game design, or bad gameplay trends that are still going on in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in the AAA space, indie, or in between the two. And this is one of those topics that it can be very hard to talk about because, rating or kind of judging gameplay or game design on its own, it can lead to people, saying, "Oh, you just hate this game," or "You hate so and so," or "You're just, hating on what's popular." But there are elements that we have seen fall out of favor, especially as the market has grown and evolved, particularly over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So I have one question for you, Josh. What's in between indie and AAA? Is that Andy? Is that
Double A, single A.
Inda?
Hmm. So there's definitely different ways we can approach this, and I guess uh, I'll start with talking about elements that are purposely there to waste somebody's time. Whether it is, extreme Kaizo level of difficulty. Now, that's not to say that Kaizo games are inherently bad. Again, the Kaizo market has certainly exploded over kind of like the last 5, 6 years with the rise of speedrunning, Mario Maker, and so on. But again, keep in mind that Kaizo games are free. You're not spending $60 on a Kaizo game. And yet, we still see developers who are kind of pushing to make their games either as hard to learn as possible or as hard to play as possible.
But should we be seeing $60 Kaizo games? Because I mean, Kaizo games are basically all about masochism, and I
Mhm.
mean, shouldn't they be like $500 or $600 at that point? Because you're giving the masochistic experience to their wallet as well as in the game. At that rate.
But like wasting somebody's time, I think is like one of the biggest, I think, design sins that can still happen in today's market. And joking aside, consumers these days are being flooded with games. Again, we've said this time and time again. And you really don't want to waste somebody's time. The when are we getting to the fireworks factory from The Simpsons kind of talk? And I feel like developers are still, or there's still that idea that, length equals quality. And in many cases, it does not.
Yeah, it does not at all. Length has zero to do with quality. Actually, I won't say that. Length almost has something to do with anti-quality. They're not exactly parallel, but they do run a lot of things in common because typically the longer the game is, either the developer put in a crap ton of work or they didn't, and the game is inferior because of it. So a longer game without a lot more work is typically bad. You know, not always, because I mean you have the shorter games that you can play forever kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
With long play times. But I mean, I that's both a longer game and a shorter game at the same time. So I mean, that's sort of a Safely Stream one. So like we give Safely Stream stuff to pass, but
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to just a straight up longer game, you need content to fill it out. And if you're not filling it out with content and you're stalling the player based off of difficulty, based off of whatever, based off of filler content, whatever it is, it's not good.
No, it is not. And it's important to clarify what Shark said about having short games that can be long. And my voice is already dying on this 4th of July, so that's good.
Maybe you just
But
need to shoot some firecrackers in your
mhm,
throat,
there you go.
light up your throat.
But when we talk about games that have very short experiences that can be played long, What we mean by that is a title that has a very streamlined, very short-term core gameplay loop, but it's inherently designed to be replayed again and again and again. So roguelikes would be a really good example of this. Titles that kind of really lean into long-term progression, such as mobile games, would also be example. Or even, deck builders, games that the core gameplay could be 5 to 30 minutes long, but you can repeat that 5 to 30 minutes gameplay loop again and again, and it still is entertaining. Like most multiplayer games also fall into that line, unless we're talking about playing Civilization.
Yeah, most live services also fall into that category.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But when we talk about when there's a problem, is that when a game demands a lot of time to be spent playing it. So that instead of a core gameplay where you can sit down and get 20 to 30 minutes of enjoyment, it turns into you need to play this game for at minimum 20 to 30 hours before you start to see, anything good in it.
Hmm. Yeah, it is an issue. You don't want to, you know, just put a whole bunch of filler stuff before the game gets good. You also
Mm-hmm.
don't want to put a bunch of filler stuff after the game gets good. And by filler stuff,
Mm-hmm.
wow, the camera changed colors when you coughed. The you don't want, and by filler stuff, that could mean anything. That could mean just overly reusing content. That could be, I'm going to make this really, really hard jump that's going to take 500 attempts to do it for no reason other than just to slow the players down. You know, I'm going to, let me think of another example. I'm going to make them repeat the same fun thing 5 billion times till it was no longer fun 20,000 times ago, but you're going to have to still do it many, many times over again because I don't have anything else to put here, you know?
Mm-hmm. And the other part about this, excuse me, is when a game pads out the onboarding or learning process. There's this tendency among strategy games and strategy game designers that the game is designed that you're learning through failure. As in your first like 2 to 3 times you're going to play this campaign, you're going to lose. And the point is that you're going to learn through failing eventually what not to do.
I know onboarding.
Yep. Such as with the Gundam game, with Old World, with just about like any very systems heavy kind of design where a developer kind of fails on building a proper tutorial. And the problem is twofold with this. So much to learn. It kind of is that you're not going to learn how to play the game through playing the game. It's kind of like you're going to learn through failure, and that's the only way you're even going to have any chance of winning. And the problem with this is that one, it pads out the experience. Two, it is greatly overestimating how much somebody's going to commit to playing your game. And three, it is just you're kind of just applying a band-aid fix to your whole game's issues of UI and UX.
Yeah. And the the issue what we run into with that kind of thing is you're overusing stuff, you know, and you're it would be much better to have a game that is, I don't know, what, 4 hours long and wows you every single minute rather than something that's 40 hours long that wows you once every 40 minutes. But that wow means far less because it was 40 minutes apart because I was bored for 40 minutes to get to that wow kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying you need a wow moment every minute kind of thing, but a wow moment every minute is better than one every 10 minutes, which is better than one every 40 minutes, which is better than one every hour, which is better than one every day kind of thing. When you're talking about days for wow moments, that is very bad. When you're talking about hours for wow moments, no, that's bad. You what would you say would be the acceptable um longest time for a wow moment? What, about an hour? Maybe less than an
Yeah,
hour?
I feel maybe no more than 30 minutes. Like, in 30 minutes time, you know, something should be happening. Like, anything that makes you want to keep playing the game. It goes back to the ever popular Civilization, just one more turn kind of feel to it. But yeah, as Allura says, I think it depends on the game. Like, we're playing a platformer, every, I would say like 2 to 5 minutes, something should be like, oh my god, what just happened kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, when but that also goes to say that you shouldn't have to wait for 30 minutes for your first wow factor. You
Hmm.
should be getting wow factors, several of them in the first 15 minutes. But after that point, every 30 minutes, hour might be acceptable kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you can make the game shorter kind of thing, and still needs to be long enough to get well enough outside of Steam's refund policy. But if you make the game shorter, more dense kind of thing, and densing down those wows so they're closer together, then you get a better effect of your game, and you're going to build more fans. You're going to have less refunds. You're going to have more people, more word of mouth spreading about your game, and you're going to have higher completion rates of your game.
Hmm. And I think to Allura's other comment about, yeah, like start under power and having to grind. Like, I've used that term like dead time. When nothing is really going on, you're just kind of going through the motions of playing a game. And we see this in a lot of kind of like long form mobile games or puzzle games where here's 70 levels, and then once you do those 70 levels, then we're going to unlock something amazing, and then we're not going to unlock something else amazing for another 50 or more levels. If you remember Grindstone, which again, having grind in the title should have been an indication there that yes, it's great to do something fun on your first level, but then you're doing the same thing but a little bit harder for the next 30 levels. Like, you need to, like, this is something that we talk about or we see in a lot of mobile games, and when we start analyzing design, is about finding, as Shark said, finding those wow moments, finding those, the carrot on the stick. And you have to design your game to motivate somebody to keep playing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it not only does it depend on the genre, but also depends on the person playing it themselves. We spoke about psychology a lot as well, like when I spoke with Ramit, that there has to be something that gets those dopamine levels up when somebody's playing a game. And most people aren't going to sit around and wait for you to get to the good stuff. And again, the good stuff could be anything from finding a shiny piece of weapon, beating a level, getting double jump, and a Metroidvania could even apply here.
Yeah, and addressing what El Gordo slash Oscar said in my chat, he said, if we consider refunds, you have to plan the hours to be in the first 2 hours, but be careful you do not have all there and front load the game. Well, sadly, you do want to front load your games, but you don't want it all front loaded unless you only have a front side of your game. You do want something to carry people through, but you really need to front load it to get the hooks in people. You've got to hook the players to get them to play farther, because if you don't have enough stuff front loaded to hook them, then they aren't going to experience the rest of the content in your game. So there's no point in having the rest of the content. So you need to have enough front loaded that you hook the player to continue on and get through more of the content of the game. Because the last thing you want to do is make 500 hours of content and have people only play the first like 2 minutes and refund,
Yeah.
because at that point you only have 2 minutes worth of content and you just wasted a lot of time on the other, time. And you want to really get enough things in the front that it gets them to go farther. And what I would do is really, really condense that 5-hour, 500-hour game down to probably like a 40-hour game, or maybe even smaller than that, and condense all those wow moments kind of thing, and make sure there's enough that are front loaded, enough that will keep you going all the way through the end, and something really big at the end, if not a couple of big things at the end. You don't need necessarily more wow moments. You just need wow moments that are more climatic kind of thing, and really, sell it kind of thing at the end. But you don't want to ride on that. You want to still have stuff at the beginning, because if you don't have stuff at the front, then nobody's going to make it to the back or the middle for that matter. But you don't want to. You need to front load it enough that people are committed enough to get to the middle, and then you need to have the middle not be bald and have enough to carry people to the end, where you leave people with a good climax at the end and people enjoy your game at the end and are big fans. So it's if you have too much time between those wow moments, you're going to lose players. And if you don't have enough front-loaded wow moments at the beginning, you're not going to have any players that get very far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, and this is also the importance of onboarding. That if people aren't getting invested in your game within the first like 15 minutes of playing, they're not going to stick around. And that was an issue that I think SD Gundam ran into. That it's an amazing game, but it's an amazing game that requires a lot of what a lot of people call gamer tag. That the game is not giving you a reason to play it. It kind of requires you to find that reason to play it. But the problem with that mentality, and it's the same thing we see in a lot of strategy and very complicated games, is that it only works for the most hardest of hardcore portion of your fan base. For people who are new or casual players just wanting to jump in and see what it's all about, you can't say, oh, the game opens up once you spent 100 hours playing it. Because a lot of people don't want to, start at negative 100 hours in order to play a video game.
Yeah. I would say that Gundam did not, and with onboarding, that Gundam isn't, where would you say that it was not giving the players, something to have kind of thing? I mean, it definitely was giving it to them. They were giving it to them all at once, but they were not telling anybody how to use any of it, how any of it operates. So,
Priorities.
If you're given a whole bunch of cool stuff and you have no idea what the cool stuff is, I mean, like if I give you a cool piece of technology and it looked really, really cool and sci-fi, and you had no idea where the on button was, if there was an on button, or what the thing even did, or how it did it, or how to use it kind of thing, and you just fool with it, for like so many minutes, you're going to get tired and put it down, and if you don't onboard people and tell people where the power button is, how things work, and what this thing actually does, people are going to get give up on trying to get it to work because, I mean, it could be the coolest thing in the world, but if they're not willing to put in the time to figure out how to operate it, you know, they're going to leave. And
Yep.
that's the issue when you don't onboard properly, even when you have all this wow factors.
Hmm.
And that is the Gundam games, that we played the other day, the biggest, downfalling of
Yeah.
that game.
Yeah. And I want to go back to some of that Shark said a minute ago about kind of, carrying people from the early game to the mid game and then to the mid game to the late game. Because we see this when we check like the achievement completion rates of a lot of games, that you'll typically find kind of a major drop first relatively early in the game, probably within the first hour, and then you'll find kind of another drop, usually when the game kind of enters into whatever its groove is going to be. So it's that point where you've unlocked the majority of the upgrades. You're kind of at that point where the core gameplay loop is solidified. And your goal as a developer is again that you want to keep as many people who play your game invested in it for as long as possible. And as a weird coincidence, again, this is why we see a lot of success in the mobile market and the games as a service scene. Because these games are designed to be as engaging as possible. Again, it's something that when Rami and I did our talk about free to play and pay to win elements, that there's a reason why these games are designed in that very same formula. Because it's a formula that carries somebody inherently from beginning to middle and then from middle to end. And you
Mm-hmm.
see it in every gotcha game, every kind of game that's designed around, we want to get somebody to where the money making is, or the money making for us. So we want to make it as streamlined and as easy to play as possible. The whole idea that when you do quests in a mobile game, you're by inherently doing those quests, you're going to level up to the cap and then get to, the arena or the PvP. That's not done on accident. That's done explicitly to get somebody to the part that they want you to spend money on.
Mm-hmm. And games have different aspects of where they make money, but you definitely, um, a lot of the live service games, they make the money by keeping you there, which is
Hmm.
the reason why a lot of them make a point of never letting you go. You've got to be on here
Yeah.
at every day to get your login bonus. You got to
Hmm.
be here 5 minutes after that to get your next login bonus. You got to be here 15 minutes after that to get your next one. You got to be here 30 minutes after that to get your next one. You got to be here an hour after that to get your next one. You got to be here 5 hours after that to get your next one. And if you're not here for all that, then you get screwed. And
Hmm.
and then they do, like, oh, you got to be here at this time to fight this boss. You got to be here at this time to fight this. You got to be here at this time to do this. And if you're not there, you're screwed. And they're locking you into like these times, trying to, they're manipulating you to be there basically at all times at every high moment, which is when you're when they get you committed to be there at all those times, they get you committed to spend money
Hmm.
because you're already investing all this time. So why not put more money into it? Because time is money.
Yep. And to Amir's comment about repetitive gameplay mechanics without any scope or creativity. Yep, and this is again why a lot of these games, once that initial lure runs out, people tend to just, bail and abandon ship. The topic is kind of talking about bad or poor game design elements that we're still seeing developers use today. So things that kind of repel consumers that developers still making a mistake on. And the problem that, and this is something again that when Rami and I saw about, oh, so lower your stream. Okay, I thought that was on my side.
All right, I'll
But
turn him up a little bit.
the problem that when Rami and I spoke about with mobile design is that the goal of any mobile game is you need to keep somebody playing for at least 2 weeks. Because as Shark said, that's when the sunk cost fallacy comes into play. I've already spent 2 weeks on this game. I'm going to play it for another week. Oh, I've played this game for 2 months. Why not give them, $10? And it
Mm-hmm.
just builds from there.
I've already
But
given
if
him $10.
you,
Why not just give him 20? I've already
yeah,
given him $20. Why don't I just give him 100? I've already given him $100. Why not just give him 1,000? I've already given him a
yeah,
thousand. Why don't I just give him my entire bank account?
mm-hmm. And then give them your house. And
Mm-hmm.
then give them your firstborn child.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with all of this is that it all hinges on you keeping them invested to begin with. And a lot of developers fail when it comes to that initial investment. Like, we have played very amazing games from indie devs over the last few years here, but a lot of them are just very poor at that first impressions. And like the Vision Software said, like that is a game that it has a really great concept to it, but there are a lot of things right out of the gates or right out of the gate that is going to repel consumers. How the game starts, how it looks, how you start learning these titles. And each one of those issues chips away at your fan base.
Yeah, the game doesn't really reveal its depth for what, until you die or something.
Yeah, like
And
at least a good like 30, 40 minutes.
and and during that time, you're, well, during the whole time, but you're exposed to art that's not bad, but not bad art in a game is bad.
Hmm.
I mean, my last title was had not bad art, but it, in terms of Steam and the current market, it was freaking horrible art.
Yeah.
And you
Um,
can't have that.
hmm Like that game that I showed on Steam a few months ago, Galactic Mining Core. It's a game that I keep coming back to and playing. It's a very short gameplay loop, but what they do is that everything is kind of, revolves around it. So if I do X, it makes my ship better. If I do Y, it lets me do more with that. And again, it's something that we've said before that the best gameplay loops are those that are very short but they're inherently enjoyable and they can be replayed again and again. Like you may not think of this like in terms of a Mario game or Doom, but that's how it works. What do you do in Mario in the course of 40 seconds? You run and you jump. But that running and jumping, it's very fulfilling to do, it's very enjoyable. So
Hmm.
you can keep playing it for each and every stage. With Doom and Doom Eternal and Doom 2016, the core gameplay loop of Doom is 2 to 5 minutes long at most. But, those 2 to 5 minutes are going to get your heart pumping and racing, and you're going to do it again and again and again.
Hmm. And you really have to get this. I don't know. You have to get where there's enough stuff to do within the first part of the game. You know, you know, you have to hook the player some way. If there's not enough stuff to do, then maybe there's story that hooks you. If there's
Hmm.
not story, maybe there's cool mechanics kind of thing. There's not very many of them, not very much stuff to do, but the stuff that's there is really impactful kind of thing. And you know, you could be that, I mean, streamlined tutorial slash onboarding is not going to do it, but what it will do is it'll prevent stuff from going bad. because if you don't have good onboarding, it's going to ruin it, kind of thing. But if you have good onboarding, nobody's going to notice. But you want nobody to notice rather than somebody to notice something bad about your game. So, so
Uh,
that's definitely part of the formula, but doing that alone will not do it for you. You have to have more.
and that more is again going to be dependent on what your game is, what you're trying to do with the design, and there is no one size fits all approach to it.
Mm-hmm. And every game is different. Every game has its advantages and disadvantages, but you need to have enough stuff front loaded at the beginning of the game to get people to leave the beginning of the game and continue forward. Because if you don't have enough stuff front loaded, sadly, people won't go farther. But like we said before, you need stuff after the front load to keep people going. If you were to make it like a, I don't know, like a heat map or something, or like a heat
Mhm.
chart, you'd want the beginning of the game to be really, really freaking hot. And then, like, you'd want the middle of the game to be a steady, well, not necessarily a steady temperature, but have, like, keep moments with cool moments in between kind of thing, and just have it, like, swing, like a Spider-Man swing on his web. You create that arc between the two hot moments kind of thing. And, but you don't want to create the hot moments so far apart that Spider-Man, face plants into the ground. You don't want it to get so cold that, you just drag on the ground and just kill it, kill Spider-Man. You want to have enough art there to continue on. And then you want to, as you get to the end of the game, or, building up to the end of the game, you probably want to have those moments closer together and higher up. So you're making this swing upwards in elevation kind of thing, and constantly swinging. And then you get up to the top, to the end of the climax, and you have this huge hot spot like at the beginning of the game, but it's probably shorter. It's still just as hot, but it's probably less length kind of
Yeah,
thing. But you
like
never
going,
want to let it completely drop all the way down to the bottom, because
yeah.
and you would prefer not to get it even close to the bottom, because the fact is every consumer has a different ground level height to where they're going to quit the game. And once Spider-Man hits his face on the ground, they're quitting. So the closer you can make those hot spots, the less they're going to have Spider-Man face plant on the ground.
Hmm. And to go back to what Shark's been saying about in terms of having these wow moments, that once you get into like the back quarter of a game, the wow moments can become far slower. For one thing, you've kind of already introduced all the best stuff probably in the first quarter to half of your title, but you still need to have something to keep people engaged. Whether it's, as we said, story, a new mechanic, new bosses. And this
Drop
is
dead
also.
gorgeous art.
Mhm. And this is why we see for a lot of games that, again, the longer a game goes, the more of a player drop off there is. Eventually, it will stabilize. And that's when you're left with your hardcore fans, or the people who are all in at that point.
Mm-hmm. And when you're doing your marketing, what you honestly want to do is you want to market towards, getting as many of those hardcore people on there, and less away from the others. Now, what I'm not saying that you should build your game only for hardcore players. What I'm saying is that what you should be doing is aiming to get the people who are going to like your game to play your game, and the people that you know aren't going to like your game, don't market to them, because if 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 you're making a platformer game and you're marketing to people who play first person shooters kind of thing, what's going to happen is those first person shooter people are going to buy your game. They're going to leave a negative review because this game is shit to them, and then they're going to refund it. So now you have a bad review and you have a refund, and you made nothing for it. Matter of fact, you may have lost money depending on what platform you're on. So, well, Rastel says some first-person shooters players might play platformers. Yeah, but that wouldn't be the first-person shooter audience. That would be the platformer audience because they are in both audiences. But you don't want to market to the first-person shooter market. You want to market to the platformer market. So don't market towards people who aren't going to be interested in your game. Market towards people who are going to be interested in your game, because in the end you will have better review scores, and higher sales, less refunds, and less wasted money on marketing that really didn't matter. Because, like, why spend, let's say $5,000 marketing to first person shooter people when you can spend $5,000 marketing to platformer people and make far more money? You may lose. You probably won't even make $5,000 off of the first person shooter people. But
But
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, but that's still no excuse not to do onboarding, because a lot of people will then say, well, why have tutorials? If everyone is playing a first person shooter, why do we care to have a tutorial section or basic onboarding?
And that's a fatal mistake, because the reason why is because while you're not marketing, you're marketing for that people. You don't want to limit your market to those people. You want to, have where anybody who's interested in your game can get into your game and can enjoy your game.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is even if it's not their genre of choice, they were interested enough to put the buy button. So don't lose them after they hit the buy button. Make sure that you have good onboarding so you don't lose them. Make sure that you have a good front-loaded section at the beginning. Make sure you have a good, middle that carries you through, and a good climax at the end that, leaves people on a high note. Because if people bought your game, whether they are your specific target audience or not, if you don't have all those things, they're not going to stay. And not only that, but some of your hardcore won't stay because of that either. So at that point, you're burning a candle from both ends, and we're not trying to make light; we're trying to make darkness in this. So you want as least fire as possible. We're burning a house from two ends. You want to have an intact house at the end.
Yeah, and the other point is that as a developer, you may not fully know how far your game is going to go. You may think that your game may only appeal to first-person shooter fans, but let's say it's a very amazing, like, platforming or melee system. You may be able to get fighting game fans in, or platformers. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll want to purposely limit your audience. I think that's kind of the main point. There's a difference between designing a game for a specific market and purposely leaving elements in that are going to limit your market.
Yeah, you never want to limit your market. Limiting your market is like putting a knife at your chest and be like, "Hey, does anybody want to push this in me?" Because I got this here. I'm ready to die. Do you want to? Do you want to? Do you want to? Do you want to
I
just give
think
this a little push?
as a very as a very weird example to this, we can even see this with Kaizo games being designed today. There are a lot of Kaizo creators who are putting in quality of life features into their Kaizo games. If a Kaizo game can have quality of life and UX design to it, then your game does not have any excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Few questions. I want to go back to a question Amir asked earlier, and then we'll get to Rat's Tail's question. His question was about how do you know when your gameplay is good? Like, how do you know when you have a fantastic core gameplay loop?
And that's both a
And,
very easy question and a very hard
mhm,
question at the same time. It's a simply extreme answer.
yes.
And that is testing. Testing will tell you what that is. Now
Mhm,
then, the question is, can you interpret the testing properly? And that's the question, you know. And
mhm,
can your are your testers good enough? And do you have enough of them that gets proper testing? And that's another factor. And you know, if you can get good enough and enough proper testers, and you're good enough at interpreting feedback and acting upon it, kind of thing, and you don't wait too long to get the feedback so that you're not locked into things that you could have changed earlier, as long as you get all those things, you should be on a good path. You know,
mhm.
maybe not the 100% optimal path, but you will be on a good path. And you know, that good path, if you're perfect at all those, you're on the perfect path. Of course, no game is ever perfect, but you
Yeah.
know, just saying.
Yeah, like it like, as a good example, that Mage Mountain game that we played on the indie stream last week. It's a deck building roguelike that has some very interesting design systems to it. The art in that game is nowhere, I think, at a state where I would say it's marketable yet. But we were enjoying that game at its probably one of its more raw states. And again, like with when Neon Continuum was considered a Project Triad, that if people can enjoy your game, as trimmed down without like anything else attached to it, that's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean you're done. And again, I think that's where a lot of developers also will tend to struggle. That hey, me and my 10 friends really like my idea. Let's turn it into a full-fledged game. No, you still need to do play testing and iteration on top of that because, like we've said, once you've gotten your core consumer base down, you've got it dialed in, you need to start looking at ways to be as inviting as possible. And that goes into onboarding and UI UX.
Yeah, I really wish I was where you were done because I would have been done with Neon Continuum like 2 years
Yeah.
ago.
And it is tough because a lot of these elements that we talk about, they're very much. I don't know if I want to use the term anti-consumer because there's obviously that's when we get into like pay to win and that kind of skeezy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of anti-gameplay. Like anything that keeps somebody from enjoying your game, I would say would fit into this category. And
Anti-enjoyment.
yeah. And I actually have another part that I want to talk about, but I want to get to Rat's Tail's question, and I want to throw it over to you. And as a time check, I know we are probably getting into about an hour into the stream, or an hour into our discussion. But to Rat's Tail's comment or question, how do you make a game appeal to a wide audience? Again, a lot of these questions come back to playtesting. It comes back to what the user experience specifically of your game is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why people gravitate towards Nintendo and Blizzard when it comes to their gameplay experiences. Because their games are designed to be, almost immediately gratifying, or at least, top of the line Blizzard, I guess what we could say. But like when we play a game like Balan Wonderworld, that when we started playing that, it was just like, you know, eh? Like this is the gameplay I'm getting? And you don't want somebody to say that 60 seconds into your game.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you from personal experience. See what happened with my last game, the old word of the day, Chromasia. The way
Mm-hmm.
I attempted to appeal to a wider audience, not a wide, quote unquote, wide audience, was it was a tactical RPG, which is definitely a niche. And so I built the game to be the best game I could make for that niche. But at the same time, I did tons of UX design, tons of UI design, and all this other stuff, and tutorial design, onboarding, all this other stuff, because I know the number one complaint on all tactical RPGs and such is I have never played a game like this before. I have no idea what I'm doing. Refund.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Nintendo's making a tactical RPG right now with Mario plus Rabbids. So there's going to be a lot of people who are just entering the tactical RPG thing. And why are they going to just be entering it? Because they did tons of UX and UI design to make the game streamlined, easy to play, easy to learn how to play, and flows smoothly. So I was like, I'm going to do the same thing with mine because my aim is to be like Nintendo's game, a great game to get new people onto the game, as well as a great game for hardcore people. So I get a far wider audience because I don't eliminate the new people who are interested. And when I did that, I did testing not only with hardcore fans of tactical RPGs, because I definitely needed those in there, but I did with moderates and light people, as well as people who hate tactical RPGs, as well as people who hate turn-based games in general. And I tested with all of them. And by the end, they all loved the game. And when you can make people who hate your genre and hate your turn-based as a whole, when you can make them like your game, you're appealing to a wider audience.
Yep, and that I think is a very important point that people need to understand. That when we talk about kind of the consumer base for genres and particular gameplay loops, there's a difference between somebody who is a fan of a particular developer, somebody who's a fan of a particular genre, or somebody who's just a fan of a very specific game. And a lot of developers fail to capitalize on that. Again, like we've said, when people try to copy, whatever's the popular game, whether it's Darkest Dungeon, FTL, Fortnite, whatever, that just because your game is just like it doesn't mean you're going to magically get all those people to play your game.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand, like I said in a post I just wrote a few weeks ago, you have to understand for every genre, what do people like about it? What do people don't like about it? And why do people play this genre? Because if you can't answer those three questions, then you're not going to be able to create or understand what the consumer base expects or what people want to play in it.
Yeah, in fact, it's often the opposite. Not only are you're not going to get those people that played the other game to play your game, but you're going to get those people to hate your game. Because why would they buy your game if your game is just an inferior version of this game? Which is why your game either needs to be better or different.
And going back to aesthetics, how many games have we played that are retro inspired that look worse than the Nintendo games they're trying to emulate?
Tons. Because I think a lot of those are retro inspired because we suck at art and we're not going to invest anything into art. So here's our best crappy, Nintendo games look like shit. So our games can look like shit too, and we'll put this out there and it'll sell a lot because Nintendo games look like shit. So, but no, they didn't, some of them did, like the LJN games looked like horrible crap. Some of them looked like horrible crap. But the timeless ones, the ones that people aspire to, do not look like crap.
Yep.
And using that as an excuse is not going to make your game successful. We see this all the time with all kinds of different art styles. I'll make my game with just basic shapes, and that'll make it, stylized. But there's nothing to the basic shapes, and it fails horribly. Where, on the other hand, you have just shapes and beats that do so much with those
Hmm.
basic shapes, and it's amazing. And then you
And
have these people that are like, oh, I'm going to do low poly because it's a style, and I'll be successful. And it's this generic looking basic crap everywhere, and
hmm
it looks horrible, and nobody cares about those games.
yeah,
Where at the
and
same time, there's low poly that spent the work and effort into artistry
mhm.
into it, and look really really great, and people go out and play them. So picking a graphic style is not having aesthetics in your game. And without aesthetics, you just have crappy art in your game.
Yeah, and this is again that difference of trying to do something above and beyond what these older games did. And
Or at
there's
least do
no,
equal to it.
yeah, you have to either be beyond what they did or you have to go in a completely different direction. If you're just trying to make a Mega Man clone, like what we saw in Mighty Number 9, you have to do more than that. And if you don't do that, well, again, the question remains, why should I play your game? Why should I play a worse FTL when I can just play FTL
Mm-hmm.
or Darkest Dungeon? And again, complexity is not the answer because
Complexity
a
is
lot.
almost the anti-answer because complexity is this hurdle that players have to overcome to enjoy your game.
Yep, and that's another really good example as something that's a bad game design element. Complexity does not equal depth. And one of the biggest traps I think a lot of developers fall into is say, hey, wouldn't Darkest Dungeon or hey, wouldn't this popular game be better if we just make it 20 times more complicated? Instead of making the control scheme easy to learn, we're going to throw 30 more commands onto this game. Because
20 more
surely we're.
sub-menus.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, just keep adding windows. In order to find and answer your question, you have to go like 15 windows deep in order to get that information. Eh.
Complexity is a train to a point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as big as some of these, but it's definitely a trend that people make overly complex games that have nothing to them, no depth. I've seen some games that are like just basic platformers, like less than Mario kind of thing, like less than the original Mario. They have less depth, less mechanics, less good stuff than the regular original Mario, but
Mm-hmm.
they are so complex that it's like, how in the hell do you play this thing? And then they did have some onboarding kind of thing very loosely, and
Mm-hmm.
like you get to the end and you're like, yeah, this is just the worst Mario one,
Yeah.
and it was so complex and combobulated and like didn't make any sense, and like it was horrible. It was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Complexity is not depth.
Yep.
What
And
what complexity is you're walking down the street and then you walk into a spider web and you get it all over your face. That is complexity. There's a
mm-hmm.
complex spider web that you just walked into and you just got it all over your face, and no, get it off me.
Mm-hmm.
You what you want to do is you want the least complex game that you can make, but while having all the depth. Because
Yeah.
the difference between complexity and depth is complexity is just surface level. It is just this layer where it's hard to figure out. Depth
Yeah.
is, man, I can just dive into this and just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and
And there's
go
more to
any different kind
discover.
of direction kind of thing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a real kind of analogy here would be like um complexity would be a pitcher, a pitcher of a piece of meat on a table. And you're like, wow, that is one really good looking piece of meat. And then you grab onto it and there's nothing there. It's flat. Where
Yeah.
complexity would be you go get, I mean, complexity, depth would be where you go to get that piece of meat. And man, it was created by the most amazing chef ever because you take a bite into it and it's like no other roast you've ever had before. You're like getting all these different flavors. You're getting this, a little bit of lime, a little bit of what?
I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. I'm getting my OBS just cut off for a second.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
We're back.
Yeah, we're back. That was weird.
So
Yeah.
depth would be in that analogy would be a professionally cooked roast kind of thing that when you bite into it, it's not just your normal roast. You're not just like that's a good roast. This is like mind blowingly good. You got the maybe lemon and hints of lemon, hints of garlic, hints of onion, hints of this, hints of that, and it tastes like there's a lot more here, and like it's like just blowing your mind how good this is kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I could eat this for the rest of my life and be happy kind of thing.
Hmm.
Where if you just do normal without complexity or depth kind of thing, then you just have a normal roast.
Hmm.
And it's good, but it's just a normal roast.
Yeah. And a good example of this would be kind of the differences between Factorio and Dyson Sphere Program. That though Factorio is a game that has gone to basically define its own genre, that the Factorio like for a lot of people. And there are a lot of games that have tried to emulate Factorio. And a lot of them you probably have never heard of because they're bad games. They basically said, what if we took all the onboarding and kind of progression of Factorio and made it even more confusing?
Mm-hmm.
And those games didn't work. The reason why Dyson Sphere Program kind of blew up was it basically said, here's Factorio, let's make it easier to learn, and if Factorio goes in that direction, we're going over there.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew up. And I mean, it blew up more than I think the developers even expected it to. And that is the kind of success you want out of your game. You want to say, okay, we expect, let's say, 100,000 people to buy this game, and suddenly we are now at 600,000 and counting. And that is that situation where they had what their core audience is, they knew what their audience wanted, but they didn't exclude people who have never touched Factorial before. And
And
when
they
you can
also did
have,
not do the exact same thing as Factorio.
yep,
They were different, so they were both better and different in a
oh
lot of
yes.
ways.
And when you can do that with your game, where it's not just saying, do I play Factorial or do I play Dyson Sphere? But it's, okay, Factorial does A, B, and C, Dyson Sphere does D, E, and F. So it's different, it's a different variation on the same taste.
It also does A and B too.
Mm-hmm. But the focus is different in Dyson Sphere than it is on Factorio
Yeah,
for, a very clear reason. They don't want to compete directly with Factorio.
yeah. If you compete directly with a game
Mhm.
by being way too similar to them, then you're in trouble. Unless that
Mhm.
game was very very unpopular, in which
Yep.
case you still might be in trouble because that game might have been a reason why that game was very unpopular.
Yeah.
And if
Um,
you
and,
if you copied that reason, then you just screwed yourself.
or you get lucky like Path of Exile, and Blizzard dropped so many balls with Diablo 3 that Path of Exile was just basically like it because by default because Diablo 3 was so poor right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
As a time check, I know we are, I think, about an hour in. I do want to get to El Gordo's comment about obscuring mechanics, so I think that's very important to talk about. But any other topics that come to your mind that we haven't discussed yet, Shark?
Just one going off of what you said. Maybe Neon Continuum will be the it because Cyberpunk 2077 dropped the ball so hard.
Or Hearthstone? I don't know how Hearthstone's doing
Yeah,
these
yeah.
days.
Hearthstone is also dropping the ball right now.
Hmm. Again, just have your Mario point be Hearthstone, but better and with more neon.
Hearthstone and Cyberpunk 2077, but better.
There you go. Perfect. There's some shots fired right there. But uh, a lot of what we've talked about and a lot of what we mean by bad gameplay elements, they're very much anti-gameplay. They are there to repel or detract somebody from playing your game. And what Ogoro said about obscuring elements, that again, it's like a variation off of complexity. That there are a lot of games that are very simple to play, but they are so obscured in terms of what it means to play the game that again, it falls into that difficulty versus complexity trap. A lot of horror games fall into this, especially those that are designed around brutal difficulty. That you take two steps out, oh, enemy runs in, stabs you, you're dead.
Mm.
But you didn't know that you were supposed to, whistle in this room and then slowly crawl over here, and then the game is easy. And this is where we get into those games where the length isn't because the game is good, the length is because it's just difficult to learn. So that once you know how to play this game, it may only be like a 20-minute long run, but it took you like 3 hours of trial and error to get to that point.
Yeah. And that gets into RPGs that have too much grinding kind of thing. And they
Mm-hmm.
will, stretch out the game by having too much grinding in it. And I mean, you do always want, I think, a little bit of grinding in RPGs because, like, that's kind of a staple of the genre, but you don't want to overdo it. Now, then, there are exceptions to that rule because you can certainly have tons and tons of grinding without overdoing it if you design the game around grinding. And Disgaea did that very exact thing because they designed their game around grinding and made grinding fun through all the different ways to progress through the game. There's all these different progression loops, and those are like, all these, forms a whole lot of different ways to grind, which, is like sometimes you want to grind more than you actually want to do anything else kind of thing because the game is built to make that fun, where your normal RPGs are not built to make that fun. They're and the more built towards fun that grinding is, the more grinding you can have in your game without being a negative. So, and the less you build towards that, the less you want grinding you want to have into it. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to have this balancing based off your mechanics and the way your game is set up to how much grinding you have in it. But oftentimes we see RPGs with nothing built towards grinding and has epic tons of grinding, like to insanity, and it's like, oh no.
Mm-hmm. And like to Okoro's point about non-guns and Rain World, like this is that point where things kind of go off the rails when it comes to the gameplay. You want the player to be able to understand what they're doing. If they're just pushing buttons and things are happening, that's not getting them invested in the game. That's the issue that I had with Old World. That yes, my character is moving on the map. I'm seeing numbers go up. Why is anything of this happening? I don't know.
That's also
So,
the issue with a lot of adventure games
mhm,
and the adventure genre as a whole, because like a lot of it is I'm just going to grab these items and then I'm going to combine these items at random for unknown reasons and then try them out here, and try to find one place where they
mhm.
work, So it's that exact thing.
And again, this is where you fail in terms of UI UX. if somebody's playing your game and doesn't know anything as to what's going on in it, that's not getting them invested. And again, people will argue, well, it worked for me. I figured it out. It only took me, 6 hours and watching, five YouTube Let's Plays. But now the game is amazing.
Yeah,
But again,
but not all games have 6 hours worth of Let's Plays on YouTube because some of them don't have any.
oh yeah, with non-guns, like I tried to look up guides for this game on the Steam guide page, and one of the guides literally said, "I don't know what I'm doing in this game. This is just a guess as to how to play it."
Mm-hmm.
And again, onboarding UI UX, this is not where you want to,
Die.
break the mold or make it confusing.
It's also not the stone you want to die on, not the
Hmm.
hilltop you want to die on, because why would you die there? I mean,
Yeah,
you're going to ruin your entire game and all the work you put into it because you refuse to do this one thing. It's like oh, what would be an analogy here? It's like you make a race car and everything. You spend $500,000 and like 5 years of your time to build this elaborate race car, but you're going to put these old ball tires on it because you don't want to put it in, and then the first time you start it up and put it in a gear, you lose traction, goes right into the wall, and the whole thing blows up. Good job. You
hmm
don't want to die. You don't want to kill your game or your race car because you didn't put decent tires on it.
yeah. And again, like if a developer, no developer should be saying, well, the mechanics are supposed to be confusing because that's, part of our vision. No.
No.
No. Again, this is not where you want to argue with consumers on. If consumers can't figure out your game, that's a problem on you. And I think there's still developers out there who see it as a problem with the consumer. Well, you just don't understand my game, or you're not a fan, or you're not part of our market. No, if
Well,
somebody.
they're partly right. They're not fans of their game because you didn't
Mhm.
you didn't take advantage of it. They were willing to become fans of your game. They bought your game. Your game was not willing to let them be fans. And it's like somebody comes to your door to knock on your door to be your friend and everything, and then you come out and the first thing you say is, you know what, screw you, screw you, screw you.
And then you punch
And
them in the face.
yeah, and then it's like, like, yeah, most people are not going to take that and they're going to leave. And is
Hmm.
that their fault? No. Is it your fault? Absolutely.
Hmm.
So don't try to blame that on them.
And I think this is one of the reasons why I've been coming more, even though I'm not a huge fan of them, I've been coming more around to the thought of having different difficulty levels in games. Because if somebody wants to play your game, but they're not the super hardcore, grandmaster at it, give them a lower difficulty level. Again, it should not, at least in better games, should not impact what the other people are doing. But if you can get, you know, several thousand more people to play your game by having an easy mode or giving them more approachability options, that's, 2,000 more potential fans for your next game and your next game after that. Because again, I think this will be my final point, and then I think we'll be going to wrap things up. That at the end of the day, bad game design elements, they keep people from playing your game. They repel them from it. And you don't want to be you're essentially throwing money out at that point. You know, who cares about people playing my game? 500 people are happy with it. But if you want to succeed in this industry, you need to approach things in a way that you're adding people to your fan base, not removing them. And again, this is on a genre by genre basis. But again, the games that succeed are the ones that have very wide appeal to it. And the way they get that wide appeal is by understanding why the genre works and also understanding what keeps people from enjoying it and not doing that. If you step on a rake and it hurts your face, maybe you should do something to not step on that rake.
Yeah. And back to what you said about adding the easy mode, I would personally prefer not to add an easy mode because, like, I would, I kind of like having one difficulty, so I am only balance the game one time.
Mm-hmm.
But that the reason why that I would not add an easy mode is because not because I would leave things the way they are, but because I would change the way things are
Mm-hmm.
right now
Yeah.
that they don't need an easy mode. I would address their problems and issues kind of thing in the normal mode
Mm-hmm.
without changing the difficulty and without having multiple modes. And
Mm-hmm.
if their problem is that, there's too much of a spike here, I just lower down the spike and make it less spiky kind of thing. And then people
Mm-hmm.
can get through it kind of thing. If people are having issues with, this one enemy, is very, very random and sometimes he's easy as crap and other times he's like impossibly hard and there's no chance of winning, I take out that randomability and maybe, say that these moves he can't do anymore, make a second enemy that can only do those moves.
Yeah. And that I think is the best version of that. That one difficulty that is perfectly balanced and having ways to adjust things within it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, a lot of games don't have that option. For instance, a shmup. There are a lot of shmups that you can't fully make that dynamic. There are elements of dynamic difficulty in a lot of shmups and Touhou style games, but at the end of the day, these games will often say, okay, this is what the level is on easy, this is normal, and then this is insane up here.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, you can't really combine those markets, so you can't combine those audiences into a single difficulty level.
Right.
Again, like we said, it's a genre by genre basis.
Right. And stuff like that, like Just Shapes and Beats, what you would do is give more lives
Hmm.
or reduce bullet counts or slow down timings,
Hmm.
or any number of things like that. Give infinite continues, make more checkpoints, anything like that. Although the more checkpoints thing could be done in all versions, going back towards what I said, but the other things couldn't be. So, like, you can also do a combination between the two kind of thing,
Yep.
as well as, many other things. And there's many different ways to address it, but, ideally you would do it with only one difficulty mode, but, some things don't apply to that. You could also go the way Diablo 2 did and have difficulty modes basically be a new game plus kind of thing for them,
Hmm.
where all the enemies get a whole lot harder. Oh man, your camera just went all to hell.
Oh yeah, there we go.
But like you could do all kinds of different things. But the point is that you need to make it where the game is accessible in in a difficulty manner, in a playability manner to everybody.
Yeah.
And then
And
you need extra accessibility for people who are disabled, people who, but that's another topic entirely.
yeah, and again, to end on, to be able to do that, you have to understand your genre, and you have to be able to do all the research that we've spoken about at length over this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we mean by dynamic difficulty? Very quickly, it's just the idea that the game will adjust itself based on how somebody plays it. If they're suffering, the game may give them more healing items, may throw less enemies. If they're doing really well, they may reduce healing items, they may throw more at it.
Yeah,
But
Mario had it. One of the Mario's, I think it was the Cat Mario one on the Wii U and the Switch,
mhm,
where if you died a certain amount of times, they would give you a special power up, which was the white.
Yeah, and they've been doing that since I think Mario Galaxy or Mario Galaxy 2 as well.
Yeah, and when you got that power up, you were immortal, except for
Yeah.
falling down pitfalls, which is
Hmm.
ironically what always happens to me when I get that suit, because like when it's not like this pit that I'm falling down, I usually don't die enough to kick it on, and then like I kick it on, and it's like, yeah, this really doesn't help.
Yeah. All right, but I think with that, let's wrap things up because once again, a short topic on a holiday weekend turned into a massive one.
Yep.
So, thank you everybody for tuning in. As always, if you want to catch these shows live, they are done Sundays, starting around 4:30 ET. And if you like to watch our indie game review show, that Indie Inquiries, that is Thursdays, starting around 3:30 ET on both of our channels.
Yep. And make sure to smash the like button and lick the smash button on both of our channels. Links to both of our channels. You know, you're on one, the link to the other is down in the description, as well as a link to both of our Discords. And join our Discords because there's lots of interesting things that go down there.
Hmm. And I think that will do it. So, as always, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And have a great rest of your 4th of July and holiday weekend.
And on board your dang people. See you.